Hi there, everyone. My name is Prerak Juthani. I'm a third-year internal medicine resident at Stanford, and today I want to go over a topic called time management in residency. And this is a very interesting title because specifically I want to focus on the time that you spend inside of the hospital. Residents obviously have a very tough time balancing time outside of the hospital because of how much we're in the hospital, but today's video is going to focus on how to optimize your hospital workflow. Because when you're a resident, you will be surprised. You can spend 24 hours in the hospital and it would not be enough time. But you can also spend a lot less than that if you're a little bit more efficient. So today's goal is to show you over the 3 years of residency, I've learned a few tips and tricks that have allowed me to optimize time while still maintaining a very high level of patient safety and ultimately medical decision making. And I want to share with you what I've learned because sometimes this is the hardest part of residency. Where is the line between finding good patient care while also optimizing your personal time? Because if you're in the hospital for 12 hours a day for even 7 days a week, you will be exhausted and it's a recipe for burnout. So everything I'm going to tell you today is about how I have optimized my hospital workflow to optimize how I get tasks done efficiently. So with that being said, I already summarized this, but in the hospital, it feels like 1,000 people can be pulling you in different ways. So even if you're a medical student, this is never too early to learn how to triage in the hospital. If you're a resident, this video is for you because I think these are some skills that I learned during my residency and I'm still learning as we speak, but these are things that now that I've gone through 3 years, I've had the tried and true evidence of my personal experience, and I'm hoping that this will help guide you. The objective of this video is to share specific strategies to manage your time effectively during a busy shift while still taking care of yourself. The goal of this is to make sure that you can take time out of the hospital and be very rejuvenated and recharged so that way when you're in the hospital you can make the most of it. So what is effective time management in the hospital? You could easily come into the hospital and leave in 4 hours, but that's not good time management because the chances are that you probably won't be providing good patient care. So effective time management in the hospital does 3 things. Specifically, the number one thing I want to focus on is that it preserves the integrity of high quality patient care. Sometimes people can get out of the hospital earlier, but the quality of the work is just not the same. So I'm going to try to show you tips where the quality is still going to be the same, but you still save a ton of time. The second thing is it will promote long-term well-being. And what I mean by that is you will physically be able to get out of the hospital more effectively, and that way you can go on a run, spend time with your loved ones, go to the beach, hang out with your dog. And by doing that, you will actually be more rejuvenated when you come into the hospital. Because guess what? It is a privilege to take care of the patients that we take care of. And being in medicine is such an incredible career because I feel like I have meaning. There's so many people who have careers all the time where they feel like they may not have meaning because they feel like a cog in a machine. But I do feel like every day I come to work, I meet people at some of the lowest points in their life and I feel happy to be able to help them. But if I was working here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I don't know if I would feel that. And so the goal is for you to still feel that spark of joy when you're working while also making sure you have time for yourself. And that gets to the last part, which is that hopefully what I'm teaching you today will help decrease burnout. Because when you're in the hospital, you'll be able to get work done. You'll be fantastic. But when you're outside of the hospital, you'll be having fun and having a good time. So let's get straight into the meat of the presentation. A typical inpatient resident, most people, at least in internal medicine, get in around 7 a.m. and usually they'll leave around 5 or 6 p.m. It's a little bit different for surgery. People usually get in much earlier. They usually get in around 4:30 a.m. and they often may leave around 5 or 7 p.m. The whole point is I want you to create a schedule of your day, because once you create a schedule of your day, you will be able to physically understand what parts of your schedule are amenable to the time management techniques I'm going to tell you about. So between 7 to 8 a.m., I usually get sign out from the overnight team. They tell us about new patients we had, they tell us about what happened to our old patients, and they tell us about anything we need to follow up on. Between 8 and 9:30, we actually just have flex time. You can decide how best you want to use that time, but that time is for you, and that time is to help you prepare for rounds with your attending. From 9:30 to 11:30, we usually have rounds, which means we go through every patient, we go over their labs, we go over their plan, we decide what we want to change or implement for them today. From 11:30 to 12:30, we have again what's called flex time. And what that means is you can implement or do whatever you want to do, but this is all intended to help you get things done for your patients. From 12 to 1:30, we usually have noon conference, and we actually have lunch. Okay. Again, this is important for us to remember because if you're not eating lunch, you're probably not taking good care of yourself. And then from 1:30 to 5, again, you have this flex time where you can be doing whatever it is you want to do. But again, if you do the things I'm going to teach you, I think you can make the best use of this time. So this is kind of what I'm telling you. The places where there's asterisks, it implies that you have time here that is not set in stone, and you should think about how best should I utilize that time to make the most bang for my buck. And let me tell you now exactly what I'm going to do. So I've already highlighted all of my flex times in green. If you're a resident or even if you're a medical student, I want you to think about what are your flex times. Where are the times where you actually have a bit of free time and you can add a bit more structure to it as you want. You want to be very strategic. Wherever you have this green portion, the general principles are to always understand the basics of what is defined as critical. The number one thing that you will always want to do when you get into the hospital from this flex time early on is pre-round on your patients. And pre-rounding just means that you want to go through all of the labs, all of the overnight events, and all of the new data that you have in the last 24 hours. And by doing that, you can make sure that no one is acutely unstable. So for example, let's say you come in and you find out that your patient yesterday who had a potassium of 3, this morning has a potassium of 7. That is a life-threatening value. So one thing you might want to do right away is to make sure, is this a real value? If it is truly real, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to give them calcium? Are we going to shift them? All of those things, right? So that brings me to my second thing. The next thing that you want to do right after you overview all of your things is to address any unstable patient. What do I mean by unstable? Anyone who has a low blood pressure, anyone who the nurse calls you about and says, hey, I'm worried about this patient, they don't look very good, and yesterday they looked great. You should be addressing those things first, even if it means you're not looking at the other 15 patients. Because guess what? If you don't address this patient and you look at the other 15 patients, this patient will deteriorate, and at the end of the day, they will probably have a worse outcome because you were not there to address it. So the sooner you address unstable patient, the more likely it is to save you time on the back end, because otherwise this patient could deteriorate a lot, and now they might actually even deteriorate during rounds, after rounds, and that's the last thing you want. So no one will ever fault you for going to address a sick patient early and first, even if that means you didn't look at any of your other patients. I've had hundreds of days where I tell my attending, hey, I haven't actually even reviewed any of these patients. I've been too busy with this sick patient. Do you mind if I have a bit more time? And the attending will always understand. What they will not understand is if you review the 15 other patients and there's one sick patient and you haven't looked at them at all. You should always, always, always go to your sickest patients. Right? So unstable patients should always come before stable patients. No one will ever fault you for that. And the last thing is, during these flex times, always prioritize discharges. One, it's a logistical thing. Everyone wants to get patients out of the hospital as soon as possible, and patients themselves want to get out of the hospital as soon as possible. So simply from a quality perspective and from a patient care perspective, it's just good form to say like, hey, Miss Jones looks like she's getting better today. We treated her UTI. She's not hypotensive. She's not febrile. She looks great. She wants to go home. Her son is going to be here at 1. So we make sure she's ready to go. But why else is it important to prioritize discharges early? If you start thinking about your discharges at 1:30 p.m., your social worker, your case manager, people who are going to help you get that patient out of here, most of them are going to leave by 4. So if you tell them at 2 p.m. that you want to get this patient out by 4, they will not be able to help you at all. That's why you want to start thinking about those discharges by 8:30, because then you can allocate. You can tell the caseworker, hey, this patient is going to leave at 1 p.m. She needs a ride to her house. Can we make sure we arrange for that? And they're much more likely to be able to help you if you let them know early. Just like how you are going to only be able to help other people if they told you early that they need help, right? If someone reached out to you 10 minutes before they needed help and you're in the middle of 16 other patients, you're not going to be able to do that. So those are my general arching principles. But now let's go into some of the details of what exactly this means. So here is my general workflow. I almost always follow these 5 rules, and if you follow these 5 rules, I almost guarantee every place where you're in the green, you will be able to manage your time more effectively, and you will be able to get more work done. The first thing is, if anyone is sick, if anyone has a new fever, if anyone says, if a nurse physically calls you and says, hey, this patient looks sick, go and take care of that patient first. That's the number one thing you should be doing. Then the second thing you're doing is, let's say no one is too unstable, everyone is looking good at the time that you first get signed out at 8 a.m. Then the next thing you want to do is review everyone's labs pretty quickly. What does this tell you? By reviewing everyone's labs, you will be able to say, hey, Miss Jones, yesterday she had a white blood cell count of 18. Today it's down to 11. We feel good. But look, Mr. Smith, yesterday his white blood cell count was 7, and now it's 12. I'm a little worried that he may have an infection. Maybe we should start antibiotics. The other thing that you'll be able to do is address electrolyte issues. If someone has a potassium of 3, you can repeat them right there in the morning. That's not something you need to go and see the patient for. You can just act on lab values. The third thing you should do right away, early, is call consult early. Let's say someone came in with acute coronary syndrome and you want to touch base with cardiology. Call cardiology early, because guess what? On the other end, the cardiologist has 20, 30 consults, and they're not going to be able to help you if you reach out to them with a consult at 4 p.m. because they already have 20 people they have to see. And if you reach out to them at 4 p.m., they're not going to see your patient until the next day. So the better thing for you to do is to actually call consult at 9 or 10 a.m. So that way the cardiology person says, okay, I know about your patient. I'll make sure I see them. It might take me a while because I have 20 other patients, but thank you so much for reaching out to me early. And by doing that, you will be ultimately helping patient care. If you call that consult at 2 p.m., the patient won't get seen until the next day. Chances are now you're going to have to write an extra note for that patient, because instead of being discharged tomorrow, they're now going to have to be discharged the day after, because we don't need to have cardiology's recommendations, right? And the last thing is, once you actually, let's say you decide on a plan after you round. Let's say you decided for Mrs. Smith, we're going to go from ceftriaxone to Zosyn. Implement those orders right after you talk about them, because otherwise you'll forget. And more importantly, if you do those things right after you round, it makes it a bit easier for you to implement all of those things and keep them fresh, and then the patient care is still moving forward. This is going to sound very paradoxical, but a lot of patients have notes. Every day you have to write notes on patients. And a lot of people feel overwhelmed because if you have to write notes and you don't write them until the end of the day, you're going to be really behind. But notes are usually the last thing that you should be worried about. Why do I say this? One, because notes don't really matter. One, as long as you know what happened to the patient, you don't have to spend too much time on notes. But if you are writing your notes at 8 a.m. or if you're writing your notes at 11:30 a.m. instead of calling consults, the consult is more important. And if you write that note, but then you call the consult and something changes, well, one, that note is outdated, but two, it just wasn't the best use of your time to call a consult so late, because it really does impede patient care. So always follow those 5 things, and I can almost guarantee you that you'll be making better use of these green spots of liberal time. With that being said, there are just general things that you should follow when you're doing all of these things. Boundaries and kindness go a long way. So what I mean by that is, just anytime you call a consult, something as simple as please and thank you, or thank you so much for helping me during this patient's care. It's really overwhelming, but I appreciate you being there. That actually goes a long way, because everyone in the hospital is very stressed, and just someone acknowledging that things are hard can be really nice. The second thing to always remember when you're doing these 5 things, calling consults, reviewing labs, if there's anything that doesn't make sense to you, ask for help. Know when you're outside of your comfort zone, because if you don't ask for help, things in the hospital have a way of building up and building up and building up and blowing up in a way that's very unexpected. And the best way to avoid that is to ask for help. The biggest times I have realized patients end up having bad outcomes, or maybe something goes wrong, is because we just didn't ask for help early enough. If we're worried about something, chances are someone else is going to be worried, and you should never worry alone. So if you're worried about something, bring it up and make sure you seek help. And the last thing to remember is to take micro breaks. Even if it's just something as simple as, 5 seconds after you round to just breathe. It's okay. It's a reminder that time is finite. It's a reminder that everything is going to be okay. And even when it's overwhelming, just take a few deep breaths in and know that a lot of people have gone through residency. A lot of people have gone through medical school before you. Everything you're experiencing, while it is very real, is doable. A lot of people have done it, and you're definitely also going to do it. And you'll set the tone for people after you, right? So just take a deep breath and just acknowledge things are hard, but just by taking those few seconds in the day, you could really, really make a big difference on your well-being. So another few things. Bundle tasks. So if you're going to call cardiology for patient A and patient D, may as well call them together. right? If you're going to call nephrology for patient B and patient C, may as well call them together. Because if you're going to make that call already, it's easier to send out both the pages at one time. Now, let's say you call cardiology, you get them to call you back, great. And now guess what? Now you're calling cardiology again 15 minutes later. That just took an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. But if you repeat that 6 or 7 times, that's already 40 to 50 minutes in the day that you could have saved, right? Similarly, I try to do all of my notes at once. Doing all of my notes at once, I'm just knocking them out one by one, and it helps me get done. But if you're doing note here and you're doing a note there, you're consistently mind shifting, right? You're going from Mrs. Jones to Mr. Park, and as you're switching those things, it takes a lot of mental bandwidth. And something that could have taken you 5 minutes now takes you 15, because initially you were taking the note, and then your case manager calls you, and then you do something for someone else, you put it down, you go back to the note, and now it's just hard. But if you do your notes at the end of the day, after all of the case management and social work stuff has been addressed, you're going to be much simpler and you're going to have fewer distractions. The last thing is to delegate. Delegate, and ask for help. So it's not your job to find the patient a skilled nursing facility. That's the case manager's job. So you let them know early, let them do their job and say, hey, this patient's going to leave today. Can you help us find a SNF? I'd really appreciate it. Let me know what else I can do to help you. Let's say someone's undomiciled and we're trying to get them housing resources. Reach out to the social worker and say, hey, this patient's undomiciled. Can we get them some housing resources? Please let me know what else I can do to help you, but I'm hoping you can take care of this for me. Just by delegating, you are making your life easier, but you're also helping others because you're telling them exactly what they need to do to help you with your job, and you're telling them exactly what they need to do to help the patient. So I hope this helps. This has definitely helped me be a little bit more organized in residency. As I said, it's very important to follow this concept of going down a list of things, stable patients, making sure you act on labs early, calling consults early. And I know it sounds counterproductive, but do your notes at the end of the day when there are fewer distractions and you don't have to code switch as much. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It means the world to me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.